Sipari Mai rasta banawe baradur. Sipari Mai rasta banawe baradur. Sipari Mai rasta banawe baradur. Sipari Mai rasta banawe baradur.
My mother belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. She lived in two worlds, between two traditions, in the past and in the present. She was neither Afro nor Indo-Trinidadian. She was both, Dougla to the bone, and deeply religious with it too. Catholic by faith, Hindu by affiliation. In cosmopolitan Trinidad, in that in-between space which belonged to my mother, she regularly pilgrimaged to the shrine of a black female statue at Siparia Roman Catholic Church in South Trinidad. And it is there that I first learned the stories of two traditions, Catholic and Hindu. Catholics lovingly refer to the statue as La Divine, short for La Divina Pastora, the Divine Shepherdess, while Hindus hail her as Sipari Mai, Mother Durga, Mother Lakshmi, and since the 1890s as Mother Kali, Kali Mai, or Sipari Ke Mai. In this sacred space where two diverse religious traditions from two continents meet, one centuries old, the other merely 2,000 years in the making, that statue and the cultural practices that surround her stands poised between Catholics and Hindus, drawing pilgrims from both traditions. Revered by two distinctly separate traditions, she stands as a Madonna Murti, the only one of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. This black statue, called La Divina Pastora by Catholics, is one of more than 400 black Madonnas in the world. And, like our La Divine, the other black Madonnas also reside in places of pilgrimage and legend. The black Madonnas in Europe bleed, sweat, walk, and talk. They heal the sick, allow women to bear children, and intercede on behalf of their worshippers. Legends tell of devotees hiding the statues in caves and forests when invaders enter the land, of statues returning to their places of discovery after being moved to a new location, or of them suddenly becoming too heavy to move to a new place. Religious festivals of European black Madonnas involve carrying them in procession. So, in these ways, the ceremonies, beliefs, and narratives of our black Madonna mirror her European counterparts in all ways except one. Here alone in the Siparia Roman Catholic Church, pilgrims of radically different religious beliefs seek her out. Catholics, Hindus, Muslims, spiritual Baptists, Buddhists, and other non-Christian groups who over the last 100 years have made of this sacred icon something of a universal mother who transcends barriers of race and religion. I was only a child when my mother introduced me to the statue, who, created from cedar, and barely 3 feet high when fully clothed, has attracted pilgrims of many different religions and races. My mother did not know how the statue got to Siparia, but she held me intrigued with origin tales that claim that one Good Friday a long time ago, a Spanish woman was weeding her dashing garden right where the church now stands, and she accidentally chipped a doll-sized statue hidden in the sand. Blood oozed from the cut, and the woman attended to the wound. But by midday, the statue had changed into a girl, and by evening, the girl was an old woman. Some people say that the statue was found on Quinam Beach, about 12 kilometers south of the town of Siparia. Others say it was found on the banks of the Quinam River, or in the forest that borders the beach and through which the river flows. Even more say that it was found near the Martinique Spring on Erin Road. And at around this time, 10 large muscular men arrived from Venezuela, seeking the statue of the patroness of their village church, which had mysteriously disappeared. These men claimed that they had been told in a dream that the statue had absconded to Siparia, but strong as they were unable to lift the statue to take it back home with them. Still, others insist that the statue was a real woman who would help all who came to her and then return to the forests. But a man once followed her, and when La Divina Pastora saw him, she disappeared, leaving the statue in her place.
What we know of in terms of the origin of the statue is not really further more than 1808. The first record speaks of it as coming from Venezuela. A priest who was attached to the Cumana mission in the Orinoco Delta apparently suffered an Amerindian attack. He fled in a canoe to Trinidad, landed at Quinam Beach, and ended up eventually at the mission of Siparia, where he claimed, and we know not how, that the statue saved his life. This is the first record we have of the statue being at the church.
I think perhaps the most credible theory is that it really came from Venezuela by the Capuchin monks, and they brought this statue with them. But I've heard other stories as well. Some people say it was found in the forest and brought to the church. Some people said it was part of the bow of a ship, and when it was shipwrecked, that part of the ship survived, and they brought that part of the statue into the church.
How and when the statue arrived at the church bore little interest to my mother, who never sought to discover much about the history of the Spanish Capuchin priests who brought devotions of La Divina Pastora, the Divine Shepherdess, to the New World over 250 years ago. But in 1759, when the Capuchins came to Trinidad as evangelists to convert the native peoples, they established a mission in Siparia, dedicated their church there to La Divina Pastora, their patron saint, and they set out to Christianize the Warrahoon Indians, who often traveled down the Orinoco River and pilgrimaged to the San Fernando Hill to their own cultural hero, Haburi.
The town of Siparia originally started as an Amerindian settlement sometime around 1000 AD. This is the evidence we have from archaeological remains that were recently uncovered, as well as those that were uncovered in the 1950s by Professors Irving Rouse and John A. Bulbrook. The area that was an Amerindian settlement existed well into the 19th century. During the mid-18th century, in the year 1758 to be exact, it lost its purely Amerindian population when it became a mission of the Roman Catholic Church and was evangelized by Capuchin monks out of Aragon in Spain.
The Warrahoon inhabited the Siparia mission until the coming of the British in 1802. But the Capuchins were not amazingly successful in converting them, and their presence on the island of Trinidad has always remained shrouded in mystery. Yet, early records show that these Amerindians were the first non-Anglo devotees of La Divina Pastora, for they visited and paid homage to her in their own way on their pilgrimage to San Fernando. Although many Warrahoon Indians continued to live in the surrounding forests until the 1950s, the Amerindian devotions at La Divina Pastora came to an abrupt end, perhaps because of political upheavals and revolutionary wars in Venezuela, which prevented them from coming to Trinidad. Nevertheless, as a result of the European and Amerindian contact, many people from Siparia today do not believe that the statue was brought to Siparia by the Capuchin priests, but they assert that the statue is Warrahoon and that the Spanish usurped the statue as their own, naming her La Divina Pastora.
In terms of pure anthropology, we determine that the statue may have originally been the work of a particular artisan called a Santero. A Santero is a sculptor of Amerindian origin who would have carved saints, medallions, and other relics for the Roman Catholic Church shortly after the evangelization of the Amerindians in the 17th and 18th century. The work of Santeros is particularly well known in northern South America, as far north as Mexico. And we have two pieces of evidence that link the Santeros of South America to Trinidad, that being La Divina Pastora and the Black Virgin of Tortuga in Montserrat. The similarities are physical. The eyes, the nose, and the mouth, which provide character for the face. There are certain similarities which exist in all these products of the Santero. And there is also some similarity to animistic objects that have been molded into Amerindian pottery since the year 250 AD. So we can see some hybridization of the animistic spirit beliefs of the Amerindians and the beliefs of Christians who would have created that hybridization by conversion.
Is the bronze-colored statue Warrahoon? I do not know, but my mother assured me that the statue is a bust with arms jointed at the elbows and wrists, and her neck is also jointed to allow it to move more easily. She wears a crown, holds a staff in her hand, and for more than 100 years she has been very richly dressed. Father Armand Massé, a French missionary assigned to the Siparia Church as a parish priest in the 1880s, wrote in his diary on 20th December that year,
"The Virgin is dressed like all the virgins of Italy and in the Spanish countries, and like all the Spanish virgins, that of Siparia is dressed. Her wardrobe is well furnished. No year passes without her being offered several blouses, skirts, and dresses."
Today, the statue is dressed 8 times for the year in a sacred, secret ceremony reserved only for women and performed by altar ladies in the sacristy of the church. Tradition states that, long ago, only virgins dressed the Madonna, but now only altar ladies do so, those outside the childbearing years. Mrs. Eloise Ramdeen, former seamstress of the statue, explains how she got involved in undertaking that role for 30 years.
I got involved by sewing for her in the church of my home affair. Myself and my husband were separated, and I used to cry a lot and ask God to help me. And I had a dream. I saw a young lady, Indian lady, with a white dress, her hair flat, and a piece of cloth over her shoulder. Come round, and she come on the back step and come out. So I turn and I say, oh God, these people can't hear you doing something. They always come in any time to worry you. I say, church man, I now come to lie down to rest. I quarreling, in the sleep. I felt when the bed go down. And when somebody sit down to the edge of spring bed. So I say, she reach. She say, get up. No. I say, oh God, go and come back. She say, girl, I can't come back. I want to show you something. I say, oh God, I now come to lie down to take her. In my sleep, I saying so, In sleep, I'm talking to her, and I don't know it's like the wind, I say, oh God, I'm tired, girl, go home. She said, well, watch me. I turn this way, and I say, I seen you. She said, you seeing me? I said, she said, you have a dress to sew? I said, yes, but I'm not sewing it now. I come to rest. I'm going to sew it later on. She said, well, I want you to see how to cut the dress. And she really showed me, girl. She sit on the bed, and she showed me. She said, you see? I said, She do that. So I said, man, how this dress also? So she said, you see what I'm showing you? I said, go ahead. Then she sloped the armhole. So she said, you see what I show you? I said, She said, well, get up now. I said, no, give me a chance. And within that time, I really got up, Who I see? Nobody. I started to quarrel. I said, what it is? Well, you have me haunted? Tell me what it is you want. Anyway, I got up. I take scissors, needle, thread, pin, and I come on this table. And darling, I did just what she said. When I cut the back and I base the back where the zip going and I hold it up, it is the dress. I put it on the pattern and it was the exact pattern I got. You know your girl glad now.
As a teenager, when I began my decade of discovery, I learnt then that not all of La Divina's pilgrims see her in the same way as the Madonna. In fact, people of Siparia remember when the Chinese went on pilgrimage to the town to participate in the Catholic celebration of her feasts. They called her Kuan Yin, the Buddhist goddess of compassion and mercy. Of the Chinese, Father Armand Massey wrote in his diary,
A Chinese girl came to ask the Holy Virgin to heal glaucoma that she had in one eye. She needs a miracle, for the eye is deeply infected, but the Holy Virgin knows how to make miracles.
Elsewhere he writes,
A Chinese couple coming from the other end of the island visited, and the lady brought to Siparia a very beautiful dress in blue silk for the Virgin. The Chinese, to whatever religion they belong, they have a very great devotion for Our Lady of Sipari, and they are often the benefactors of the church.
and indeed they were. For they brought offerings of tapestries, vases, and lamps. And at the turn of the century, La Divina Pastora even sat in an ornate throne donated by the Chinese community. The statue of La Divina Pastora has captured the interest and reverence of pilgrims and artists alike. Painter Cliff Burjou has tried to capture her elusive image, and my mother often told me about Caribbean writer C.L.R. James's 1927 La Divina Pastora short story, which tells the tale of Anita Perez, a young woman who worked on a cocoa plantation and who longed to marry Sebastian Montano, the owner of a few acres of cocoa and a 4-roomed village mansion. Sebastian regularly visited Anita's family and sent her a greeting card each Christmas, but otherwise their relationship went no further. When her aunt from Siparia visited, Anita told of her troubles. Her aunt knew exactly who could help: La Divina Pastora. So, Anita took a week off from work, journeyed to Siparia, and prayed before the miraculous statue for the love of Sebastian, placing her only treasured possession, a gold necklace, around the statue's neck. Meanwhile, Sebastian, back in the village, lamented Anita's absence. As soon as she arrived home, he admitted how much he missed her. For the first time, Sebastian invited her to the Cocoa House dance. She dressed in her finest clothes, and casting one last look in the mirror, she lamented, "How I wish I had my little gold chain." Anita went to the dance, enjoying herself immensely. Sebastian had wanted to leave earlier, but she insisted upon staying to the end. So their walk home was done in silence. Inside her house, Anita began undressing. Her mother, half asleep, but listening to Anita's account of the dance, suddenly heard only silence. Then a heavy fall. She jumped up, and seeing Anita on the floor, she turned to the little table to get the smelling salts. There, in its old place in the cigarette tin, lay a little chain of gold. Pilgrims like Anita go throughout the year to the shrine at Siparia, but it is primarily during Holy Week that the secular and the sacred, Catholics and Hindus meet. As Catholics focus on the death and resurrection of Christ during the Easter Triduum, beginning on Holy Thursday and including Good Friday, thousands of Hindus pilgrimage to Siparia, hailing the statue as Sipari Mai, Mother Durga, and sometimes Mother Kali. And while the religious pray inside the church and the parish hall, vendors surround the church selling religious plaques, ground provisions, pottery, and every conceivable item. One Holy Thursday, as I celebrated Mass and begged Mary's intercession inside the church, the parish hall and courtyard became filled with thousands of Hindus who, in performing their religious rituals, transformed the church grounds into a Hindu temple.
When we go to our temple, we just take out visupas outside.
The earliest account of the presence of East Indians in Siparia exists in the 1851 parish record by Father Cornelius O'Hanlon, just 6 years after the start of indentureship. And, according to Father Thomas Haricharan, with the introduction of the railway from north to south in 1912, even more trainloads of East Indians began to arrive. But when did Hindus first come to Sipari Mai?
Indians first began paying attention to this saint in Siparia during indentureship in, I believe, somewhere in 1871. They first saw an apparition, it is said, through the oral tradition, and they discovered this saint that was residing there, and they decided to go and pay homage to the saint. Now, what is interesting, it was like a kind of nationwide consciousness and awareness, and indented immigrants from Aranjuez and from Port of Spain. There were a number of sugarcane estates in Port of Spain, in Belmont, and in Bossier village. They were leaving and to go to Siparia. Now, it was quite a distance in those days because they didn't have a highway as we have now, and didn't have this kind of pitch or asphalt road as we have now. So they would have taken cart, donkey cart or something like that, horse-drawn buggy and so on, to go all this distance to Siparia during indentureship. Now, they would have absented themselves from as early as Good Holy Thursday. And there were many attempts to try to stop them from going there and to remain in the estates and to do work. Because when they went to Siparia from these estates in Port of Spain, you have a loss of productivity. So there were attempts. In fact, a similar statue was built in Port of Spain area, somewhere in Dry River. And, but that didn't work. For one of the reasons was that the saint was white. And Hindus identified that saint with Mother Kali, because the saint appeared as Mother Kali, very dark and so on. And if you look at the way the saint is dressed even today, it's just like if she has a sari, very Indian-like, dark brown and whatnot. So they could have identified with that saint, and so they included her in the pantheon of gods. And it was very simple, it was logical, it was a very smooth flow for them to include the saint into the pantheon of gods.
Hindu scholar Ravi G contributes to the discussion.
If the Sipari Mai Murti was by the time 1870s, the community was already in shape, and therefore within that decade that community had taken shape, and it was active and it was consciously doing things. And by that time anyway, 3 decades almost, the community had enough people to want to do pilgrimage to places. Now, so I would suggest that as soon as it was there, with just the idea of the Murti and Sipari Mai Murti in the church in Siparia has this tradition of a processional. Now that would have alerted people to some things. It would have had a resonance in people's mind, because taking out murtis in procession, especially before it's consecrated, the Pranda Pratishtha is done, was something common to the Hindus who were living at that time, because they had come from India.
But why did Hindus leave the sugarcane estates to pilgrimage all the way to Siparia?
But what was particularly interesting to them, and what really appealed to the Hindus at that time and even now, was it is said then and now that this saint has healing powers. So a lot of women in particular, if you look at the number of devotees who go, they are largely women. Young girls go to get a husband, pray for a husband, or a good husband, or even if they have a husband, for their husbands to become good or better. And women who are infertile would go to pray to get a child or children.
Father Martin Sergiu, the current parish priest at Siparia, surmises that indentureship, which brought to the East Indians cultural disorientation, exploitation, and sometimes sickness, would have conjured up for them a Kali Yug, a dark time. And as such, they would have embarked on a fervent quest for Mother Kali.
Hindus were attracted to Ladivine because of the color of the statue and also because of how they interpreted the statue. Because I think as one group of people move from place to place, especially if it is a new place, the first thing they try to do is to recreate their environment. And in this Black Madonna in South Trinidad, in Siparia here, they must have seen the goddess Kali. The goddess Kali for Hindus is a goddess of death and destruction in times of sickness and disaster. So I am sure the disorientation that they would have felt, as well as the conditions of indentureship, would have qualified as a time of darkness, a time of death and destruction, also a time of recreation, because the goddess Kali is also about recreation. And Kali is very popular in India, not in certain parts of India, not throughout India, in certain parts of India. And they would have identified La Divina Pastora with the goddess Kali and come to her to ask for favors.
But whatever explanation the experts provide for Hindus at Siparia, my mother insists that there is nothing new about Hindus making a pilgrimage to the Catholic shrine. For she had heard stories that her great-grandmother, Nani Ma, a Madrasi indentured laborer, with great reverence for the goddess Kali, and who throughout her life engaged in Kali rituals, had herself escaped from India in 1910 by going on a pilgrimage to the Catholic shrine of Our Lady of Health at Barren, where an apparition of the Virgin Mary is believed to have occurred.
This is Valankani, a small town on the southeast coast of India, on the shores of the Bay of Bengal. It is situated about 200 miles south of the city of Chennai. This quiet little town of less than 1,000 residents wakes up each day to host several thousand pilgrims from all across India, who come here to pay homage to the Blessed Mother Mary in this magnificent basilica of the Shrine of Our Lady of Good Health, Valankani. Most are not Catholic, or even Christian for that matter. They are either Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, or followers of one of India's many religious groups.
In Valankani, more non-Catholics come over here and receive favors.
And this is quite evident in the way they pay tribute to the Blessed Mother. They bring gifts of flowers, coconuts, palms, and fruit. Many dress in saffron-colored clothes. Some shave their heads as a symbolic gesture of sacrifice and humility. Throughout the day, there is an endless procession of devotees making their way up to the altar to stand briefly in front of this statue of the Blessed Mother Mary and to say a silent prayer of gratitude or to pray for a cure for their illness or that of a loved one. Many childless couples come here to petition for the gift of conception. This is no ordinary statue. Dressed in a gold sari and decorated with gold jewelry, the faithful believe that those who beseech the Blessed Mother here in front of this statue and ask for a favor are rarely disappointed.
At that shrine, which is visited daily by pilgrims of all castes and creeds, Nanima abandoned her fellow pilgrims and brutal in-laws and made her way to the Madras port, where she had embarked on a ship for Trinidad. She became a Sipari Mai pilgrim many years later. Sipari Mai devotee Munananan, who has pilgrimaged to Siparia every Good Friday for the last 46 years, recalls her first pilgrimage there when she was 14.
All I can remember when I was small, when I look out by the road, I see the people and them singing and dancing. And I look out, all I could remember, they were singing, Sipari Mai banawe baradur, Sipari Mai banawe baradur. So I asked my parents that, what is this? They're saying Sipari Mai banawe baradur. Then my parents tell me that how the road is very far. So they're singing the song going to Sipari Mai. The road was pitch road at the time. We used to have to walk barefoot at that same time. And we used to have to walk in the grass because the pitch burning in my foot.
I pilgrimaged to La Divine one Good Friday during my decade of disbelief, shortly after my mother passed away. There, while some Catholics carried the cross in commemoration of Christ's walk to Calvary, I noticed that Hindus at the church were giving alms to beggars, while others engaged in the cutting of their children's hair.
The cutting of the hair, shaving of the hair as we call it, is called Mundan Sanskar. Mundan means shaven head. And it's a rite of passage. That happens, the child, at least 1 year old, around that in our tradition here. Sometimes people who do it in 1 year do it after. Sometimes now people just go and cut the hair as a token. But in those days, and my head was also shaven at Sipari Mai. So, Mundan Sanskar is a sanskar that begins the process of letting the child develop selfhood, ego, and all of that. Ego is something negative in Hinduism. But with this sanskar, the sanskar announces, but here the child is going to start to develop a sense of I. It announces to the parents, I have to treat the child differently now. The child is going to demand this place. The ceremonies empower it so much that people say, I got to do it for my child to be blessed. You know, it is a blessing, but it's also a very open, simple sociological and psychological phenomena that they're treating with. So the community is driven to want to do that because of these reasons. So when there was no place to do it, you know, and here was an offering in a kind of mela atmosphere. Mela means like, you know, the assembly of people. We've got to also remember that these sanskaras were never performed in private. It's performed in the usually place like a river where they come to do, you need the river, it sanctifies the whole thing. So that the people would have found this a great place to practice that tradition. Here was one of the important reasons. We can't see the river today, but it may have been invoked. But there was a mandir there, church that became a mandir. From the time there is Kali Mai, in that place, it's no more church. It is a mandir. So all of these converge in making this sanskar, Mundan Sanskar, drawing it to Kali Mai. But so when people say that why it is they come and to the La Divina Pastora, no Hindu goes to La Divina Pastora. They go to Kali Mai.
And Kali Mai worship, associated as it is with drumming, spirit possession and animal sacrifice, all this caused the Catholic priest Father Armand Massey some concern. For on 1st February 1881, he describes their actions.
Quite often, the coolies come with cocks or goats and kill them in front of the chapel. They truly give the Blessed Virgin an idolatrous worship.
In the past, East Indians offered animals to Sipari Mai. Today, they often make offerings of gold of all types and shapes.
Sometimes the jewelry comes in the shape of parts of the body this is a tradition which really goes back to India, that again among the poorer classes, that if something is wrong with you, whether it be your eye, your ear, your leg, then an effigy of some kind is made of that part of the body. Here it's usually made in gold or silver, but it can also be made out of clay for those who are poor and could afford nothing more. So here I have seen pieces of gold and silver in the shape of eyes, in the shape of feet, in the shape of a little girl or a little boy, so most likely the person wants a son or a daughter. And these are encountered from time to time as part of the offering that they put into the vault as an offering. An offering is very important because Hindus do not just believe in coming and saying prayers. Part of Hindu spirituality is that if I say prayers and I ask for a favor, then I must give something in return.
Children are of central concern to pilgrims coming to Siparia.
If I had to say what were the most common prayer requests, I would say prayer for the well-being of children and prayer to be able to have children as part of that general request. So they are, well, this is a shrine dedicated to a mother, whether it's the mother of Jesus or Sipari Mai. So perhaps it's to be expected that the intentions are very maternal. So they have to do with being able to conceive, and then after conception, keeping the children healthy, protecting the young from danger, releasing them from bad company, helping them to focus on their exams.
Another child-centered focus used to be the dancing of the baby, a folk performance by Harishchandra dancers. But although the practice has since died out, Mrs. Nanan remembers participating in it.
Man used to play the dantal, drum, shak, and organ. They used to be playing that, and this person who would turn the woman, the man turned like a woman, he used to be dancing. When you go now, you want your child for Sipari Mai to dance the child. Now, she come in the form of Sipari Mai, right? She dressed like Sipari Mai. So you give she the child, and she go dance the child, and then she go give back the child, and you go give she alter change.
Puja, or the offering of prayers, is of central concern to the Hindu religious community at Siparia on Good Friday, and the jarring of devotees is also often conducted.
There's another phenomena which is, or other practice which has come about in recent years, and that is the presence of a priest, again a priest belonging to the Kali Mai sect, and I have seen him myself. He sits there on a bench or a chair on a table, and he has flowers and a lota and terrier, brass cup and plate and so on, and he has a picture of a deity, most likely Mother Kali. Very old man, dark skin, and he sits in almost in the middle of the courtyard, or perhaps towards one end, and people would come and make offerings to him in cash or kind, bring flowers and grains of rice and so on. He would bless them and pray for them to have a long life and health and prosperity.
Jasa Munilal, who has been performing this function, a duty he took up from his late father, explains its history.
My father first invented this, and he was a revered dancer through his friends. Long time at Sipari Mai was muddy, and the people used to bring sand and drop in it, spread on the ground for the dancers and them to dance. And they used to throw money, like 5 cents, 10 cents, 25 cents, $1. and let us come that first. And you just come that first, that money come up. And when his friends passed away one by one, he took up this idea on his own. And he said, son, come over with me to Good Friday to help him stir the table and the small stool. And I used to go and he used to set it up, and I used to actually see exactly what he was doing. And when my father gets sick, then he says, son, every year for Good Friday, you make up your mind and your duty and go and perform your duty to Sipari Mai in Siparia. And I went to Sipari Mai and I tried something to do for the community. What we do on a Good Friday is worship Mother Durga.
So strong is the Hindu devotion to Sipari Mai that in the 1920s, when one priest locked the doors to the church, posting signs in 5 languages forbidding Hindus from entering the shrine, he had to relent because they threatened to burn down the church. Of course, not all Hindus believe in Sipari Mai. After indentureship, when religious organization began to emerge and Hinduism in Trinidad became divided into specific sects, the Sanatana Dharma Mahasabha became the largest traditional orthodox form of Hinduism on the island. Leaders of this Sanatana Dharma organization consider the worship of Sipari Mai heresy. Yet, despite the Sanatana Dharma's sanctions, many Hindus still persist in this popular belief. But it is not just the Hindus who have a day of celebration and thanksgiving before the statue. My mother always attended the Catholic celebration of the feast of La Divina Pastora, which occurs 3 weeks after Easter, when pilgrims gather at the church for High Mass, usually celebrated by the Archbishop. She joined with other pilgrims as they followed the statue through the streets in a procession, singing Marian hymns and reciting the Rosary before returning to church for the benediction. While the secular aspects of the Siparia fete have changed, the religious aspect has remained relatively unchanged for hundreds of years, except that in times past there were 2 processions. One where the men followed the Holy Eucharist, while the women followed the statue of La Divina Pastora before they converged at a point. Father Massey says of the 1880 procession,
Pilgrims of all nations, of all languages, and of all religions follow one another to the feet of La Divina Pastora. On each side, the one to the other, were at the same time French, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Indian, some of them Catholics, some Protestants, several pagans. They all have complete faith in the strength and the goodness of the Divina Pastora, who will reward them of the confidence and of the love that they profess to her.
Today, even with our colonial history of European conquest, Amerindian genocide, African slavery, Chinese immigration, and East Indian indentureship, the religious processions at our national shrine at La Divina Pastora continue, and pilgrims of every race, nation, and religion still proclaim miracles of healing, restoration, conversion. There are many stories unraveling here at this sacred space in Siparia, and these are not just stories of priests and pundits, pujaris and pilgrims, for neither Catholics nor Hindus hold any monopoly on the stories that unravel here. The Amerindians, the Chinese, the Europeans, they too have a story hidden in Siparia, in this city of sand. And where all these stories intersect, there is a true Caribbean story around that black statue. But the story that I best remember, from all the tales my mother told me, and the ones that I discovered for myself, are the stories of religious tolerance and cultural respect, of tradition and change, of ethnic diversity and unity. These are the stories I will tell my daughter, who unveiled the screen of my infertility, conceived as she was, by tears that I wept before La Divina Pastora on that Good Friday when I first met Sipari Mai.